Good morning, everyone. My name is Valeriy Kostyuk, and I'm the Executive Director of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. I'm joined today by Ihor Michalchyshyn, CEO and Executive Director of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, by Sofiia, Ringis, student who fled Ukraine during the full-scale invasion and now studying in Ottawa, and Marichka Bokovnia also arrived from Ukraine since the full-scale invasion, studied and worked here, and is now working on a documentary about the war in Ukraine. Before we begin, I'd like to share a video giving a preview of some of the work that we've been doing in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. This week marks the 4th anniversary of the unprovoked full-scale attack on Ukrainians by Vladimir Putin's Russia. It was and continues to be a cruel and unjustified assault on sovereign country. It goes against international law, defies human decency, and a systematic violation of human rights. What we have all witnessed is an ethnocide, a deliberate attempt at extermination on a scale unlike any we have seen in the West since World War II. Today, we will provide an update on the current situation in Ukraine, how, on behalf of Canadians, we are providing much-needed aid, and what else needs to be done to help Ukraine succeed.
This week, the world marks the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. This past weekend, we had thousands of Canadians on the streets in more than 60 communities to join the Global Days of Action. We gathered to pay tribute to the heroes who have fallen in defense of Ukraine's freedom and honor the heroes who continue to fight in its defense. Canadian support for Ukraine has been strong because we recognize that Ukraine support is not an act of charity, it is an act of solidarity. And as Canadians, we understand it is in our own self-interest to stop this aggression from coming to our shores. Like Ukraine, we are positioned geographically in the cross-current of two power blocks, Russia on the north and US to the south. And like Ukraine, Canada shares a border with Russia, a terrorist state that threatens the world with nuclear war. The future of democracy is being defended on the battlefields of Ukraine. Now, in the coldest winter on record, Russia is trying to squeeze Ukraine with daily barbaric attacks on energy infrastructure. Millions of Ukrainians are daily living without heat, water, electricity, and freezing temperatures. Notre message aujourd'hui est simple: aider l'Ukraine à gagner. Our message today is to help Ukraine win, close the skies, give Ukraine air defense, bankrupt Russia, seize Russian assets, and embargo Russian energy. If we do not do this soon, one day it will be Canada and our allied armies fighting Russia.
As evidence of strong Canadian support for Ukraine since the full-scale invasion, the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, through our Ukraine humanitarian appeal, has exceeded our hopes and surpassed $100 million raised and deployed in humanitarian relief from grassroots donors, from regular Canadians. Preuve de soutien continue du Canada à l'Ukraine. Depuis l'invasion en grande échelle il y a 4 ans, la Fondation Canada-Ukraine a dépassé toutes nos espérances et reculant en déployant plus de 5 millions de dollars pour l'aide humanitaire à l'Ukraine, grâce à la générosité des citoyens canadiens. And while Canada has one of the biggest Ukrainian diasporas in the world, the majority of the fundraising has come from Canadian public at large, from individuals with no personal connection to Ukraine. Because again, Canadians know what's at stake for Ukraine and for Canada. In the initial phases of the brutal full-scale invasion, our work focused on core humanitarian essentials: food, hygiene, blankets, water, heating equipment. As the war dragged on, our programming became increasingly complex, identifying gaps in what government and non-government actors were doing. Power generating solutions to remote areas where people have endured cold snaps without heat when Moscow targets their energy supplies. Surgical missions to normalize the lives of veterans and civilians through reconstructive surgeries. Clean water supplies when community infrastructure has been destroyed by missiles. We have done this effectively and efficiently as a national grassroots organization that has lower overhead and broader impact than other organizations in the field. We are continuing to transition to more long-term sustainable projects, alternative energy generation solutions, restoring essential community infrastructure, humanitarian demining, and education to make communities safer, mental and physical health rehabilitation, and more. The Canada-Ukraine Foundation is taking care of the home front in Ukraine, while Ukrainian defenders are selflessly guarding the front lines. As we all know, for Ukraine, recovery does not start after a ceasefire. It's an ongoing process. Today, every day, it cannot wait. In this spirit, we are calling on the Government of Canada, if average Canadians have been investing their hard-earned after-tax dollars in support of Ukraine in the midst of an affordability crisis, we're asking the Government of Canada to match Canadian efforts dollar for dollar to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation through 2026. Si les Canadiens moyens ont investi leurs dollars durement gagnés après impôt pour soutenir l'Ukraine, en pleine crise du pouvoir d'achat, nous demandons au gouvernement du Canada d'égaler les contributions des Canadiens dollar pour dollar à la Fondation Canada-Ukraine en 2026. Why support Canada-Ukraine Foundation and our programs? We are a Canadian registered charity with 30 years of established success in delivering humanitarian programming on behalf of the Canadian people. Unlike peer organizations, our overhead is very small and penetration in Ukraine is deeper. We do not duplicate administrative infrastructure across Ukraine, Poland, Moldova, and other countries which divert donation dollars from the people who need it most. As we continue to deliver aid efficiently, we work with our trusted partners to ensure effectiveness and that every possible dollar of donated aid goes to the front line of humanitarian relief. And we fund programs where many others don't, into acutely affected communities just behind the front lines. Canada and Ukraine have a long-standing relationship. For instance, in the 1860s, Canada faced a challenge. Protectionism had set in the south of the border. The United States backed out of its free trade agreement with Canada and adopted an official policy of annexing our country. The parallels today are eerie. Back then, Canada responded with a new push to populate prairies as a line of civilian defense against that expansionist threat. Ukrainians answered that call. They left their homes, traveled vast distances with little more than the clothing on their backs and some seeds to plant. They built homesteads, cleared the land, and established new communities to help cement Canada's claim over the western frontier. Ukrainians helped Canada then. Now Canada is helping Ukraine, and we must continue. And that's why today we ask Ottawa to help us double that support. Les Ukrainiens ont passé les 4 dernières années à verser leur sang, leurs larmes, et à sacrifier la stabilité qu'ils avaient pour défendre les libertés démocratiques dont nous tous bénéficions. Plus la victoire tarde, plus le prix à payer sera élevé. Pour les contribuables et pour la sécurité nationale de l'Ukraine, de tous les Canadiens et en fait de tout l'Occident. La Russie n'est pas seulement un danger là-bas, c'est aussi un danger pour nous, ici, juste au nord. En tant que Canadiens, on ne peut pas se permettre de les laisser gagner. The longer Ukraine's victory takes, the higher the cost will be to taxpayers and national security interests of Ukrainians, of all Canadians, and indeed the entire West. Russia is not danger over there, it's danger here too, next door to the north. As Canadians, we cannot afford to let them win. By standing with Ukraine, You're standing up for Canada.
My name is Sofiia Ringis. I'm a fourth-year student of Carleton University, majoring in media production and design. When Russia brutally attacked my country in 2022, I was just 18 years old. I was studying political science in country's and capital, Kiev. On February 24, 2022, I woke up to my mom saying, "Sofiia, the war has started." Then my friend called me, crying, telling me that she had heard the first explosions in the suburbs of Kiev. When I studied wars and their implications at university, I never imagined that this would be something I will personally face. I was fortunate to come to Canada, and I'm eternally grateful to Canadian government and to Canadians for giving me the opportunity to study here and work here in safety, and for the continued support for Ukraine. Living here in safety and comfort gave me time to reflect on basic human rights and needs. I realized that the things we call basic human rights, like freedom, safety, the ability to plan and dream, and the fundamental things like heat, water, and light, are in fact privileges. Historically, humanity fought for those rights. And after the two world wars, we decided to make them basic. But history can move backwards in a single moment, and those rights can be taken away. Right now, we Ukrainians are fighting to protect those rights. We are fighting to protect our culture, our language, and our democratic values. Those same democratic values that Canadians believe in and live by. So I'm asking you to think about what's at stake and how you can help. Because the simple truth of this war is that if Russia stops, the war stops. If Ukraine stops, Ukraine disappears. Thank you.
My name is Marichka Bokovnia, and I came to Ottawa 4 years ago as a research assistant after my country was invaded. Canada has become home for me, but my whole family is in Ukraine. This year I went to Ukraine for holidays. My city, Cherkasy, is much like Kingston. It has 4 universities and serves as a regional hub for health and services. Soon after I arrived in December, the sounds of drones filled the skies. My parents assured me it was normal, but nothing felt normal there. The next day we were attacked. Missiles targeted the local power plant and water supplies. Those missiles destroyed half of our civilian infrastructure. The winter there is similar to ours in Canada. It can get up to minus 20 degrees Celsius, so you can understand what it would be like not to have any heat, water, or light in those temperatures. You can't cook, you can't bathe, you can't charge your phones. Without electricity, hospitals could not provide care for ordinary people who were sick. Even with a generator, when the power is not stable, you can't run diagnostic machines or operating room equipment. Emergency care is compromised. Can you imagine what it's like for someone on life support? My parents had a gas stove, and we were able to boil water. It was the only comfort we had, sitting in the freezing cold day and night, unable to see anything once the sun was gone. Relatively speaking, we were the fortunate family. Word got out, and little children were knocking on our door, offering to trade their Christmas candy for a hot cup of tea just to get warm. Nothing is normal in war. People are dying every day because someone in Moscow decided to ignore international laws and invaded our sovereign country. Ukrainians were just living normal lives. Now their lives are in ruins. When I see children live in Canada, I see my own childhood. I grew up in a very safe place. I was able to live my life freely. But that was all shattered. I'm grateful to Canada. Canadians have given me the opportunity to work and to live in peace. That might sound normal to many people, but it's a privilege to me, because I have learned everything we take for granted can be taken away in a day. One day life is normal, the next day it's not. Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. You don't have to be Ukrainian and you don't have to be in Ukraine to understand why it matters. The new normal is unbearable, but your help will keep Ukrainians going.
Thank you. And we'll take questions if there are any.
Yes, Dave Baxter here from the Canadian Press. Just, over the last year, we've seen President Trump talk a lot about, hey, we're going to get a deal with Russia and try to get all these fields in play. That hasn't really moved much of anything. Just where do you stand just on like the eve of the 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion of a deal? Like, how optimistic are you a deal could actually be struck at this point?
Well, thank you for the question. None of us here are sitting at the negotiating table, so we can't comment on that. But one thing that we'll say is that Russia can end this war by stopping the invasion of Ukraine. If Ukraine stops fighting back, Ukraine will cease to exist. The bottom line is Russia can make that decision to stop the war. Everything else is just geopolitics. But when it comes to humanitarian efforts that we continue to deliver right now is to help Ukraine to get through. We'll continue doing that if and when the ceasefire or a peace deal is reached. I'm not sure if Ihor wants to add anything.
Sure. Hi, Dave. I would say that Russia has engaged in cynical diplomacy for the last 4 years and longer, especially in the lead up to the invasion. We saw nothing but Putin's demands. Those demands have not changed. What he is doing is pressuring to ensure those demands are met and ensuring that the pressure is on Ukraine in a bizarre way to give up territory that they haven't even lost in the military conflict and to change their political system and to adhere to all of Russia's demands. So what we believe will be a victorious and just peace for Ukraine is one where Russia is forced to concede, where the Russians have the pressure put on them, their assets are taken away, that the assets that they have frozen right now are used to rebuild Ukraine directly, and that will be a just peace, which is what the world needs.
And just to wrap this up, I think we've all seen that Kremlin and Vladimir Putin are masters of sleight of hand, imitating urge to negotiate on one hand, and in the other one, bombing energy infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, hospitals, civilian buildings. So we'll leave that at that.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. Did you have a firm dollar figure attached to the request for the feds to increase humanitarian aid?
Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we've raised and deployed over $100 million worth of aid to Ukraine, which was made possible by everyday Canadians. We've had experiences of working with federal agencies such as the Royal Canadian Mint and Canada Post, who have donated to Canada-Ukraine Foundation. The demand continues to grow, and we hope that the Canadian government will be able to reflect the public sentiment which is being fed through the Canada-Ukraine Foundation into Ukraine.
Just for Ihor, just for hearing reports of some Ukrainian men who would be generally seen as being in fighting age, being accused of coming to Canada to dodge the draft. How often do you hear about incidents like this in your organization? And should Canada have a role in trying to get some of these people back to Ukraine if they are fighting age?
So Canada set the parameters for the QID, or the Canada-Ukraine Emergency Access Visa. And those are parameters set by Canada as opposed to Ukraine. So I would say there were a variety of situations, people coming from Ukraine directly when the war and when the invasion started, people who were outside the country, and others. We hear those reports time to time, but really it's a matter for the Ukrainian government and their conscription and draft system. They have an embassy and several consulates across Canada, so there's continued to be change in how Ukraine registers its military age men and what those conditions would be. So, of course, our advice has been for Ukrainian citizens to adhere to the advice and laws of their government, and certainly Canadian immigration officials, when they do review applications, have the right to ask people about their military service as well. So that's what we can comment on at this point.
Peter Mazur from the Hill Times. I'm wondering if you can run us through quickly what are some of the biggest needs in Ukraine right now that you are and hope to continue addressing, and what is the capacity of the government of Ukraine to address those needs?
So, there's an expression, there's never enough of anything at war. When it comes to the work that Canada-Ukraine Foundation is doing, we've seen that this winter has been very cold here in Canada. In Ukraine, it has been cold as well, very similar temperatures as to what we've experienced here. But Ukrainians are going through this winter without power generating capacity that they had before the full-scale invasion. So our current focus is number one priority this season is energy supply. We've been preparing throughout the year because we know that winter comes every year. We've been delivering multi-source power generators to hospitals and communities in frontline regions, and we've specifically also responded to the Minister of Foreign Affairs a call to action recently and delivered additional power generating equipment that has impacted about 8,000 people in the last 3 weeks alone. So we continue to look at alternative energy sources. We also continue to look at ways how can communities continue being resilient during the winter time. We hope that next winter will not be a winter at war, but we have to prepare. So we continue to deliver energy supplies. But that's in addition to other programs that we have, which includes funding mental and physical health programs. We also have our Canada-Ukraine Surgical Aid Program, which will continue through delivering life-changing surgeries with Canadian surgeons going into Ukraine to do that and bring normalcy to people who have experienced the unimaginable, and as well as Ukrainian children. We've been funding organizations that provide services and support to children who have returned from the occupied territories and from Russia itself. So there's a lot of priorities, but right now, given that it's the winter, we focus on winterization needs.
Thank you. Any further questions in the room? We have no questions online. This concludes the press conference.
Thank you so much. Sure, let's do it.